As the sixth yet another political mapping simulator political survey is going to be ending soon, in 2nd of July, we've got several results in. With 58 response, this is by far the second largest turnout for the political survey. And as we head towards the results, we are currently at 58 votes, the highest turnout in yet another political mapping simulator server Discord history, would be around 64. Out of the 58, 31% of the electorate is from overseas, while 69% is from the United States, as of time for recording in 10:38 p.m. Malaysian time. Out of the 40, which is the 69% of the Americans, Florida has the highest total vote count, with 4 coming from Florida. California, New York, and Pennsylvania mostly tied at 3, while we've got Virginia. Virginia actually has 3, considering the fact we've got 1 person who did not use the second abbreviation. Texas, Georgia tied at 2, and other states at 1. We'll be counting these results as we get more votes, but as of for now, this is what we have right now. The polls are still open, so you can go to hashtag civic polls. At Pinned Post, you should find a poll there. It's at Pinned. Meanwhile, the largest turnout for overseas, Malaysia and United Kingdom leads with turnout tied, as those countries still retain a high presence of members in the server. After the partisan questions, as we can see in the party question on who would you vote in a US presidential election, 57% of the server, or 33 people, voted for the Democrats. 9 voted for Republicans, making it 15.5%. Green is also tied with the Republicans with 9 votes. Also, keep in mind, there is actually a 10% threshold over there, so the parties that do not get above 10% will not get a ballot access. So basically, you have to write in if the party isn't available in the ballot. The Libertarians are getting wrecked today, only garnering 4 votes or 6.9%, way below the 10% threshold. Their worst performance in YAPms history. We've got write-in votes, 1 voting for the Pirate Party, and 1 voting for the Socialism and Liberation Party. We've got 1 rejected ballot, actually 3 if you want to be technical, but we've got 1 who did not vote a party, and thus far it is rejected, as only United States parties are only allowed. Afterwards, the approval rating, Joe Biden is having a 60% net approval, not actually net approval, but 60% approval. If you're trying to compare that with the disapproval, it would be 24.1%, with 15.5% undecided. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris is getting disapproved by a majority of the server, garnering 55.2% of the vote, while 22.4% are disapproved or undecided. Both are tied. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is narrowly approved, 39.7% of the vote, while 32.8% disapproved Senator Chuck Schumer, 27.6% is undecided. Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is having a largest disapproval in the server, garnering 89.7% of the vote, and only getting 5.2% approval. That is a really big margin of net disapproval. I think that will be about 84%, I would say. Meanwhile, another 5.2% are undecided, about 3. But it's safe to say that Mitch McConnell is heavily disapproved in the server, with almost 90% of the server disapproving him. Meanwhile, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi Is also majoritarily disapproved, however less significant, with 56.9% of the vote in. Rather disapprove, actually. Rather, the approval rating would be 25.9%, while the undecided would be 17.2%. Meanwhile, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is also significantly disapproved, but not as bad as Mitch McConnell, as he only garnered 74.1%, still big, but not as bad as Mitch McConnell, which is almost 100%, or maybe 90 if you're trying to be technical. Only 10% approve Kevin McCarthy, while 15.5% is undecided. That is interesting. And that wraps all up for the partisan questions, as we see that a lot of disapprovals with only Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden getting in an approval rating. Let's take a look at the demographics questions, as we see the development of the demographics questions in the server. We've added none, actually, and let's see where it stands. This server is still majority minor, with about, if I have my maths correct, there will be 69% of the server are below 18. That is pretty significant, actually. However, the much more significant thing is that the voter turnout for 18 and above have increased. In fact, they've taken almost more than a quarter now, as opposed to the last census, which I believe it's below a quarter. Meanwhile, in race or ethnicity, as of this hour, whites are still in the majority with 55.2%. There have been a lot of scares lately that the server will be majority minority. Since I would say last month, I would say many reports saying that whites will be the minority, but as of right now, it's 55.2%, and the margin is looking quite comfortable for whites. Meanwhile, Asians are the second largest group, as expected, but with a less significant turnout. In the previous turnout, I think they have about 22 to 21%. Right now, they are currently at 19%, as opposed to whites, which is on 55.2%, which is the majority for the whites. The interesting is that those who declare themselves mixed of race or other races which are not of ethnicity, which are not listed over here, is 17.2%. That is a big increase since last time, which I believe it was single digits. Hispanics turnout has been awfully low, dipping to its 5.2. However, the black turnout has started to increase. In fact, we have 2 blacks right now in the server, and that is marvelous, I would say, as for the long time we have hosted the political survey or census, there hadn't been any blacks, so this is quite remarkable increase, 100% increase, as in the previous census we had only 1 black, and prior to the previous census there was none. Religious affiliation, this is interesting. Irreligious leads by a majority, 57 or possibly more declares themselves atheist, agnostic, or none. Christian, meanwhile, is on second and is increasing. Christians now above the 25%, which means that Christian now make up more than a quarter of the server. Islam or Muslim takes up third with 8.6%, being the third largest religion, or second if you want to be technical, if you don't count atheists as a religion. But Islam is now the second largest religion in the server. Quite impressive, I would say. Meanwhile, the ideological question seems to be quite interesting. On social issues, very progressive is the largest group with 29.3%, while those who identify as progressive is at 90%. Keep in mind, this is social ideology. We have 3.4% declaring themselves as fascist, and also very conservative. They are all tied. Conservatives at 17.2%, centrist at 13.8%, and liberal too is at 13.8%. So we can safely say that roughly majority of the server is either leaning left or a leftist. or maybe majority proggy for some members who seem to be worried that of a progressive takeover of the server, which happened not to be a good really idea, as there have been a lot of worries lately that the server might be a progressive toxic center of community, but we will talk about that aside. Meanwhile, on the economic issues, we have 19% declaring themselves as very socialist. They're declaring that very socialist. Now, this is a stark increase, but it's still not the majority, but it's a big increase. Meanwhile, socialists, not very socialist, socialist, so it's much more tamer, I would say, is on 8.6%. Mixed economy, leaning towards socialism, is the biggest group with 24.1%. So this basically means that people prefer mixed economy but leaning towards socialism, and but it's not really the quarter of groups. I would say it's kind of still a small minority group. Meanwhile, the second mixed economy leans towards capitalism is 20.7%, 12 of the votes of the electorate, which is 20.7%. Meanwhile, 70.2% favors of capitalist, like fully capitalist economic ideology, while 10.3% prefers laissez-faire. I don't know if I butchered that or not, but be sure to correct me if I pronounced that wrongly, because I think that's not English. I think that's like Latin. So, say 10.3% favors of a very, very free economic free trade and open economy, I would say. Uncontrolled capitalism. I'm trying not to about that. Up next is the abortion stance, and this is not gonna be a good news for Lance or Mark for the YAPms member server if you're watching this. Bad news for Lance. Majority of the server prefers pro-choice. To get much more detail of the result, 36.2% prefers pro-choice, fully without exceptions. That means no exceptions, pro-choice. And that would be about 21% of the members of the voter that voted in the census out of 58, 21 out of 58 voted pro-choice, in favor of pro-choice. Meanwhile, 13.8% voted pro-choice with some exceptions. About 8 of the responses, I would say. So yeah, I would say pro-choice has the majority, or leaning pro-choice has the majority of 50. So that's not going to be a good news for Lance, as he's going to have a fit on it and arguing about how abortion should be illegal, which I think it should be, though with some exceptions. But we'll talk on that later. Meanwhile, let's go to pro-life. 10, pardon me, that's actually 15.5% thinks that pro-life should be a thing. So basically banning abortion fully without any exceptions. Meanwhile, 24.1%, second largest of the opinions, thinks that pro-life should exist with some exceptions. That means the abortion should be illegal, but with some exceptions. Let's say, for instance, of rape or threatening of a mother's life. 40% out of 58 is in favor of it. Meanwhile, 10.3% has no preference or is undecided on this issue, which is remarkably small, I would expect. And off to the next one, which is gun control laws. We could say that about not a majority, but a substantial amount, 46.6% out of the 58 responses, thinks that gun control, there should be more gun control, but not too strict. So that's 46.6% favoring it, that there should be more gun control, but not too strict. However, 19% favor of heavy gun control. That means more regulations need to be needed on guns. 8.6% thinks that firearms should be outlawed. That means we need to ban guns altogether to combat this gun control laws. Interestingly, 15.5% wants to loosen gun control, which means that it's probably like they want guns to be easy accessed, which has got to be interesting. I'm guessing it's the very, very American conservatives thinking of their Second Amendment there. And finally, 5.2% wants the gun control law to be kept the current one. They want it to be the same. which is have got to be interesting, let's say. I'm not thinking why, but it's their opinion. 5.2%, another 5.2% things that are undecided on this issue, which means they don't know whether they want gun control or not, or they are unfamiliar with this issue, which is somewhat understandable, but in a political server, I guess that's interesting. And final results of the census. Also, keep in mind, I want to give a warning. This is not full results. This is updated results. So that means the polls will be closing 2nd June soon. And yeah, as the polls close in 2nd June, we might have a full result and an update on this. And getting back to the final question, the tax stance relative to your country. So it's basically asking what is your tax stance depending on your country. And look at this. A majority of the server, almost 2/3 of the server, 63.8%, is in favor of decreasing taxes on poorer and the middle classes, but increase taxes on the rich and corporations. Meanwhile, 20.7% thinks that lower classes and middle classes tax should be kept the same, while taxes should be increased on the rich and corporations. So it's not really that much. It's just like whether we should decrease taxes of poor or middle or keep them for the most of the server. And let's go to the minorities. 1.7% thinks that taxes should be increased on everything, every classes, everything, which has got to be interesting. 3.4% of the server is in favor of the flat tax. That has got to be interesting, I would say. Meanwhile, 5.2% of the server thinks that taxes should be decreased on everything, all, including rich and corporation, which I think is a bit of a inequality there. Don't think that's equal. And finally, another 5.2% of the voters are undecided on tax issues. So that's all we have for the current update for the 6th, yet another political mapping simulator political survey. And obviously, the polls are going to be closing soon. As of currently, we have about like probably less than, depending on your time zones, from 2 hours to like 23 hours. So make sure if you want to participate in this political survey or census, be sure to go to #CivicPolls. And if you can't find it in the message history, you can go to the pinned message. Is on top with the pinned, and the message should be there. The link to the form. So that's all for today. I'm Islington from yet another political mapping simulator, and the supervisor for the census team reporting. Thank you.